Why did a single step echo louder than any command? The sound came again, measured, heavy. The guard outside the steel door dragged silence into the room with each step, like a reminder no one asked for but no one could ignore. She sat at the table still, her hands pressed flat against the scarred wood, her fingertips finding grooves carved there long before this night. Her uniform shirt clung to her shoulders, the scent of iron and dust soaked deep into the fabric. No one else moved much either. They breathed, they shifted, they waited, but all of them avoided her eyes. The bulb overhead flickered, spilling light in sharp bursts across faces hollowed by fatigue. Maps lay open on the table, their edges curling, lines traced and retraced so often the ink had smudged into blue bruises across the paper. She swallowed. The taste in her mouth was bitter. Fear always tasted like metal. Her gaze found Lewis. Sergeant Lewis, steady even with his shoulder bound tight under blood-stained bandages. He sat back in his chair, one arm folded across his chest, the other resting near the sidearm on his belt. His eyes tracked her every move, not with suspicion, but with a kind of quiet loyalty that hurt to notice. He didn't know everything. None of them did, and that weight, the secret in her chest, pressed down harder than the room's silence. The younger soldier, Daniels, couldn't take it anymore. He tapped his pen against the table, quick, restless strikes. "So we just sit here?" he asked, his voice sharper than he meant. "Or do we actually talk about what happens when we step outside that gate?" His question hung in the stale air. Her eyes lifted to him, slow, measured. She didn't answer. Not yet, she didn't need to. Her stare, calm, deliberate, unwavering, was enough to make him stop tapping. He looked down at his notepad instead, as though the answers were buried in his own scribbles. But her silence wasn't strength. Not entirely. Inside, her chest burned with a storm of questions she didn't dare speak. Am I ready for this? Am I strong enough to lead them? Or will this end like it did before, with me watching, frozen, unable to stop what's coming? The guard outside shifted again. One step, the same rhythm. The sound pulled her backward into memory like a hook. Boots stomping down a hallway, shadows spilling across the floor of her childhood home. She was 15, knees pressed against the cold wood of the stairwell, her small fingers gripping the railing so tight they ached. She heard her brother's voice, raised once, then silenced. She saw his eyes when they found hers for a brief, burning second. He didn't cry out. He didn't shout her name. He only looked, silent, pleading. Then they dragged him into the dark, and she never saw him again. That night carved itself into her bones. The sound of boots never left her, not in sleep, not in silence, not in war. She forced her mind back to the present, jaw tightening. The mission, the here and now. She couldn't let them see her drift. She couldn't let them see the weakness memory could spill across her. Lewis cleared his throat, low and steady. "Orders come at dawn," he said. His voice was like gravel ground into the floor. "We don't wait past that." Daniels shifted again, biting down words before they escaped. He was too young to know that silence had its own weight. That hesitation wasn't always weakness. Sometimes it was the only thing keeping you alive. The overhead bulb buzzed, faltered, then steadied again. The hum filled the room, an ugly, constant drone. She traced the lines on the map with her eyes, routes inked in thick black marker, arrows curling around terrain they hadn't walked yet. To everyone else, it was strategy. To her, it was something else. Each arrow cut through pieces of a past she wasn't ready to explain. Every target tied itself to the reason she was even here at all. But she hadn't told them that, not yet. Another step outside, the guard again, slower this time, like he knew, like he was listening to the silence more than to them. Her chest rose and fell with a deliberate inhale. She wanted to run. For the briefest second, she wanted to push back from the table, tear off the uniform, and vanish into anonymity. Let someone else carry the ghosts. Let someone else live with the weight. But then she saw her brother's face again, that pleading silence. That night she'd done nothing. Not this time. The chair legs scraped against the floor as she straightened. The noise jolted the others, pulling them out of their haze. Her body leaned forward, palms braced hard against the table. She met Lewis's eyes first, then the rest of them. Her voice was low, almost quiet but steady enough to cut through the stale air. "We move at dawn." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. Daniels blinked, glancing at Lewis for confirmation, but Lewis only gave a short nod. The decision had been made. By her. The guard outside stopped moving. Silence deepened until it pressed like weight against the walls. And in that stillness she realized something. Sometimes the most powerful command wasn't spoken, it was taken. The others slowly shifted back into their tasks. Daniels bent his head over his notes, the pen now steady. Lewis leaned forward to study the maps again, though his eyes flicked toward her often, as if searching for something unsaid. The others kept their movements small, purposeful, preparing. But she sat back, letting her body rest for a moment. The tremor in her hands had faded. She felt the storm in her chest quiet, not disappear, but quiet enough to breathe. She watched them all, one by one. Soldiers, yes, but men too, men who carried their own stories, their own regrets. She thought of Daniels, so young, writing notes as if pen strokes could control fate. Lewis bearing scars no bandage could cover. The others' faces lined by weather and war. They weren't just following orders. They were trusting her. And that thought scared her more than the mission itself. She let her gaze fall back to the maps, her finger resting lightly on one line. The route they'd take. The same road where rumors said prisoners were last seen. Prisoners. The word itself clawed through her chest. Her brother's face flickered again. She closed her eyes briefly, steadying her breath. "Not yet, I can't tell them yet. If I speak it now, it will change everything. They'll see it as personal, not tactical. They'll doubt. I can't afford doubt, not when dawn is this close." The bulb buzzed again. A fly tapped against the glass, relentless. The sound filled the silence like an unwanted metronome. And then faintly, somewhere beyond the walls, the muffled call of a bird. Morning was inching closer. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to remain calm. The night wasn't over, and neither was the silence. She leaned back, folded her arms loosely, and let the weight of the room settle. She wouldn't run. Not again. This time when the guard stepped forward, she would too. The silence carried them all, heavy, waiting, breathing. And outside, the guard finally shifted again. Just one step, nothing more. But it was enough to remind her, sometimes a single step could be louder than any word spoken. The first light crept in without warning. She opened her eyes to the pale glow seeping through the cracks of the old concrete walls. The night had been long, heavy with silence, but dawn brought no comfort. It only carried weight. Her body ached from hours in the chair, yet she didn't move right away. The others stirred around her, quietly gathering gear, folding maps, adjusting straps, the scrape of metal against stone, the click of magazines being checked and rechecked, the low rustle of fabric as vests were pulled tighter. All of it formed a rhythm, not hurried but deliberate. Outside, a bird called again, sharper this time. The sound almost felt wrong in the middle of this, too alive for a place so weighed down. Lewis stood near the door, his bandaged shoulder stiff as he adjusted the rifle slung across his back. He didn't complain. He never did. He carried pain the way some carried faith, silently, as if it was just part of the uniform. Daniel sat cross-legged on the floor, lacing his boots too tight. His hands shook, but not enough for him to notice. She noticed. She noticed everything. And then the sound. One step, the guard outside, heavy, slow. She closed her eyes, steadying herself against the sound. Every muscle tensed, but she forced the reaction down. She couldn't let them see her flinch. Lewis looked at her, his eyes asking a question he didn't put into words. She gave the smallest nod. That was enough. "Move out," he said quietly, but his voice carried weight. The door creaked as it opened. Morning air swept in, cold, damp, sharp with the smell of earth and stone. The guard stood outside, rifle across his chest, eyes forward. He didn't speak, didn't look at them. Just shifted his weight, the faintest scrape of boots against gravel, then stood still again. She stepped out first. Her boots pressed into the dirt with a sound she hated, a sound too close to memory. For a heartbeat she felt the world tilt, the stairwell of her childhood flashing in her mind. But she kept moving. One step, then another. The sun was still low, throwing long shadows across the compound. Wire fences stretched like scars across the land, and the wind tugged at them with hollow groans. Beyond the gate, the world opened into dry, endless ground. Roads cut through it like veins, leading to places spoken in whispers. They loaded into the vehicle. Metal rattled under their weight, and the engine coughed awake with a low growl. She sat in the back, rifle across her lap, eyes on the horizon. Daniel sat opposite her, his face pale, his mouth tight. He tried to hide it, but his leg bounced with nervous energy. She didn't call it out. Fear was human, pretending otherwise was foolish. Lewis sat near the driver, head tilted slightly as if always listening, always aware of threats no one else heard yet. The vehicle lurched forward. Gravel crunched under heavy tires, then shifted into the hollow thrum of asphalt. The fences disappeared behind them, swallowed by distance. Silence filled the space between the engine's growl. No one spoke. The air was thick with thoughts no one wanted to share. Her eyes stayed on the land rolling past. Dust lifted in swirls, catching the sunlight in sharp glints. Far off, hills rose like broken teeth against the sky. She studied every shape, every shadow, training her mind to catch what didn't belong. But her thoughts kept sliding back, not to the road ahead but to the road behind, to her brother, to the night he was taken, to the silence she'd carried ever since. She wondered if he was alive, if he had survived the places whispers spoke of, if he had ever forgiven her for not moving that night, for freezing. Her grip on the rifle tightened. She couldn't let the thoughts spill too far. Not now, not when every second demanded her attention. Lewis broke the silence, his voice steady low. Convoy spotted last week, same road. Daniels shifted, ours or theirs. Lewis didn't answer, he didn't need to. Everyone knew the truth. The vehicle hit a bump, jarring them hard enough to make rifles rattle. The driver muttered under his breath, adjusting his grip on the wheel. She scanned the hills again. A flash of sunlight on metal, she stiffened. "Left ridge," she said, her voice calm but sharp. Lewis followed her gaze, squinting into the distance. For a second, nothing. Then another glint. The driver cursed, pressing harder on the accelerator. Daniel's breathing quickened. He raised his rifle, the barrel trembling slightly before he steadied it against the side of the vehicle. "Don't waste it," she said softly. He glanced at her, startled by her calm. But he lowered the weapon, resting it against his leg. The ridge stayed still, just silence, the wind carrying dust. The glint didn't return. Her pulse slowed, but not all the way. She knew better than to believe in false quiet. The vehicle pressed on, every rattle echoing in her bones. For miles, nothing moved. Just land stretching forever, the horizon pulling farther away no matter how close they drove. The kind of emptiness that pressed on your chest, that made you feel small, fragile, breakable. Daniel spoke finally, his voice tight, too loud in the silence. "Why'd you join?" The question wasn't meant for anyone specific, but all eyes turned toward her. She didn't answer right away. Her throat tightened. She could have lied. She could have said duty. She could have said country. She could have said something clean and simple. But lies never held weight in moments like this. She looked past him, out the window, her eyes following the broken horizon. Because silence can't protect anyone. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Too close to truth. Too close to the secret she hadn't told. Lewis's eyes flicked toward her, not with judgment, just watching. Daniels frowned, confused. He wanted to ask more, but the look on her face told him not to. He dropped his gaze, chewing on the answer in silence. The vehicle kept rolling. The air grew warmer, the sun climbing higher, casting sharp light across the land. Shadows shrank. The hills grew nearer. And with them the weight in her chest. Because somewhere ahead, whether on this road or beyond those ridges or hidden in the silence they hadn't yet reached, lay the truth she hadn't shared. Her brother. The thought struck hard enough to pull her breath short. She steadied herself. She had to. Because if Dawn had taught her anything, it was this. Sometimes silence wasn't survival. Sometimes silence was surrender. And she was done surrendering. The guard's single step echoed in her mind again. That rhythm, that reminder. She wasn't here to repeat the past. She was here to break it. The vehicle pressed forward, carrying them into the hills, into the unknown, into the silence waiting to be broken. And she wondered when it came, when the moment arrived, would a single step from her be enough? The first shot didn't come with warning. It cracked through the air, sharp as lightning splitting the sky. The windshield burst into shards, the driver jerking sideways with a cry that cut off too soon. The vehicle lurched, tires screaming, gravel spitting out in a violent spray. She gripped the side rail, body slamming hard against the metal, the rifle clattering across her lap. For a heartbeat the world tilted, sound, dust, the blur of earth and sky twisting together. Then the vehicle skidded to a grinding halt, nose buried in dirt, silence roaring louder than the gunfire. But it wasn't silence, not really. Because now she could hear it, the echo of the shot rolling across the ridge, the hiss of wind carrying dust into their eyes, the ragged gasps of Daniels, his chest heaving as he scrambled for cover, the wet, sick sound of the driver trying to breathe through blood. Lewis was already moving, dragging the younger soldier behind the wreck, his bandaged shoulder jerking with pain he didn't let slow him. She followed, rifle in hand, body pressing hard into the dirt. The taste of earth filled her mouth, dry, metallic. Another shot cracked, stone near her head shattered, spraying fragments into her cheek. Daniels cursed, fumbling with his rifle. His hands shook so bad the barrel clattered against the dirt. She reached over, steadying his grip with a firm press of her hand. Their eyes locked, his wide, terrified. Hers steady, though inside her chest the storm raged louder than ever. "Breathe," she whispered, "one breath, then another." He nodded, swallowing hard. His breathing slowed, not calm but controlled. Enough. Lewis leaned against the wreck, rifle propped against the hood, scanning the ridge with sharp eyes. "One shooter," he muttered. "Maybe more. Distance 405. She pressed her cheek against the stock of her rifle, scanning the jagged line of stone above. Heat shimmered in waves, distorting the horizon. Every rock looked like a shadow. Every shadow looked like a threat. Then movement. A flicker of cloth, a glint of glass. "Ridge east side," she said, low but certain. Lewis adjusted, his shot cracking out a second later. The echo thundered off the stone, but the ridge didn't fall silent. Another flash, another crack. The bullet struck the wreck, throwing sparks. Daniels flinched. His knuckles went white around his rifle. "Eyes up," she murmured. "They're waiting for panic, don't give it to them." He nodded again, teeth gritted, forcing his body still. Her own chest burned. Every sound twisted into memory, the boots on stairs, the shouts in the night, her brother's eyes. She pushed it down, focused on the present, on the rifle in her hands, on the rhythm of breath and trigger. Lewis fired again, a pause, then silence. But silence was never safe. The ridge remained still. The dust carried no movement. Daniels shifted, whispering, "Did we get him?" She kept her eyes on the scope. The glass reflected nothing but heat and stone. "Maybe," Lewis said, "maybe not." The driver gurgled, his body slumped against the wheel. Blood soaked into his vest, dark and spreading. His breaths came shallow, then shallower still. She closed her eyes for half a second, not long, just long enough to feel the weight of it. Then she forced them open again. "We move," she said. Lewis turned to her. His face was pale, lined with fatigue, but his eyes were steady. He didn't argue, he never did. Daniels blinked. "Move out there," his voice cracked, too loud, too human. She looked at him, her stare cutting through his fear. "Staying is worse." The words landed like stone, heavy, unshakable. He pressed his lips together, nodded once, and adjusted his grip on the rifle. They slid out from behind the wreck, bodies low, steps measured. The earth beneath them was hot, the dust clinging to sweat, filling every breath with grit. The ridge loomed closer with each step, its jagged teeth cutting against the sky. Every rock seemed to watch them. Every shadow seemed alive. Halfway there a sound, a small sharp click. Her body froze. Lewis's hand shot out, pulling Daniels back. His eyes scanned the ground, jaw tightening. Tripwire, thin as thread, stretched low between rocks, barely visible unless you knew where to look. Daniels swallowed hard, sweat dripping down his temple. "They're waiting for us," he whispered. "They always are," Lewis muttered. She crouched, studying the wire, the faint glint of a buried trigger beneath the dust. Her throat tightened. The memory of boots, the memory of being frozen. Not this time. Her fingers worked steady, careful. Sweat ran down her back in cold lines, but her hands didn't shake. One breath, another. Then the wire snapped free, harmless. She exhaled, slow. Lewis gave her a short nod. Respect, trust. They moved again. The ridge grew closer. The silence stretched tighter. And then a sound. Not a gunshot, not the wind. A voice. Faint, broken, carried by the breeze. Daniel stopped dead, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" She had. It wasn't English, it wasn't loud, but it was human, a voice carried on the air. Her chest seized. Her brother's voice surged in her memory, pleading, silent, taken. She gripped the rifle tighter, forcing her breath steady. Lewis met her eyes. He'd heard it too. His brow furrowed, silent question in his gaze. She didn't answer, not yet. Because if the voice was real, if there were prisoners here, hidden in the rocks, then the mission wasn't just tactical anymore. It was personal. Her throat burned with words she couldn't say. Not yet. If she told them the truth, if she said what she suspected, everything would shift. Trust might break. Focus might shatter. She bit it back. The ridge loomed above them now, close enough that shadows cut across their faces. Every step forward carried them deeper into silence, deeper into danger. And still faintly, that voice. Daniels whispered, "What if it's a trap?" Her jaw tightened. It probably was, but her chest told her something else. What if it is? What if it's him? The thought burned. She forced her legs forward, each step heavier than the last. The silence wrapped around them, thick as stone. And somewhere ahead, hidden in shadow, the truth waited. The voice didn't fade. It drifted through the stone, carried on the wind in broken fragments, too soft to understand, too human to ignore. She froze mid-step, boots pressed into the dirt, rifle raised but unmoving. Every muscle tensed as her ears strained against silence. Daniels leaned close, his whisper sharp. "You hear that again?" Lewis raised a hand, cutting him off. He listened too, his body still, his face angled toward the ridge like a man reading a language carved into rock. There it was again. A rasp, a syllable, a word half-choked and swallowed by the wind. Her chest tightened. She wanted to answer, to call out, to break the silence with sound, but she didn't, she couldn't. Her brother's face flashed across her mind. His eyes that night pleading, silent, vanishing into the dark. Not yet, not here. Lewis shifted closer to her, his voice low, gravel scraping the air. "Prisoners, has to be. Question is, bait or real?" She didn't respond. Her throat wouldn't let her. Daniel's hands gripped his rifle too tight, his breathing uneven. If they're prisoners, we can't just. Lewis turned sharply, eyes locking him down. Quiet. Daniel snapped his mouth shut, but the fear in his face didn't fade. The sun climbed higher, heat pressing against their skin, sweat sliding down spines beneath body armor. The ridge loomed over them, sharp edges casting jagged shadows that split the ground into patches of blinding light and cold darkness. Every step closer carried weight. She led, not by order, not by rank, but because her body moved before theirs did, because silence bent around her and they followed without question. The rocks shifted beneath her boots, small stones tumbling and clattering down the slope. Each sound felt too loud, too dangerous. The silence after was worse, waiting for response, for a bullet, for something unseen. Nothing came. The voice rose again, louder, still broken, still too faint to understand. She clenched her jaw, forcing her breath slow, steady. Her heart wasn't steady. It hammered against her ribs, each beat echoing the same thought. It could be him. Lewis's eyes flicked toward her again, searching, as if he could see the storm behind her silence. She gave him nothing. Not yet. They reached the base of the ridge. Shadows swallowed them whole. The air cooled, heavy with the scent of dust and old stone. The world above seemed to lean closer, pressing down, watching. Lewis crouched, scanning the slope. We climb, careful, no skylines. Daniel swallowed, his throat bobbing. His fingers trembled on his rifle, but he crouched low, following Lewis's lead. She stayed a step ahead, always. The climb was slow, deliberate. Every grip on stone tested twice, every boot pressed soft into the earth. The silence of it stretched, broken only by the faint rasp of breath and the shift of gear. Halfway up, the voice came again, clearer now. A word, a cry. Her heart stopped. It wasn't his voice, not exactly, but it was close enough to slice her open. Her hands clenched against the rock, fingernails scraping stone. Her breath caught, lodged in her throat. It could be him, it could. She forced her body upward, higher, faster, until Lewis's hand grabbed her ankle. She froze, twisting to look back. His eyes burned into hers, sharp, questioning, warning. She swallowed, forced her breath steady, gave a short nod. She slowed, matched pace again. The ridge top came into sight, jagged lines silhouetted against the burning sky. Lewis whispered, eyes. They froze, scanning. Shadows moved, small, brief, someone was there. Daniel stiffened, his rifle trembling upward. She pressed his barrel down with her hand. His wide eyes snapped to her. She shook her head once. Not yet. The voice came again, louder now, pain in it, desperation. Her stomach twisted. Lewis moved first, sliding onto the ridge top, body low, rifle sweeping. She followed, then Daniel's. The world opened. A narrow path cut between boulders, stone walls rising on either side. Shadows stretched long across the ground. And there, tied against rock, hands bound, face beaten, a man slumped forward, his voice breaking in weak cries. Daniels gasped, prisoner. But she didn't see just a prisoner. She saw her brother. Not him, not exactly. The man's hair was darker, his face older, his eyes a different shape. But the resemblance, the tilt of his head, the shape of his jaw, struck so sharp it stole her breath. Her hand shook, her throat closed. Lewis scanned quick, eyes sharp, steady. Trap, he muttered. Always a trap. But even as he said it, his rifle didn't lower. The prisoner raised his head. His lips cracked, voice rasping, words broken. Not English. Foreign syllables coated in blood and dust. Daniels moved forward a step, but Lewis's arm shot out, stopping him cold. Eyes, Lewis snapped. They froze. She scanned the rocks, every crevice, every shadow. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, drowning thought, drowning reason. And then a sound. The sharp, metallic click of a rifle bolt sliding into place. Above, to the right. Contact, Lewis barked. The ridge exploded with gunfire. Bullets ripped the air, sparking off stone, slamming into dirt. The prisoner cried out, collapsing against the ropes. Daniels dropped flat, rifle clattering, breath ragged. She dove behind rock, dust exploding around her. Lewis fired back, controlled bursts, his body steady even under the storm. Her hands gripped her rifle, pressed cheek to stock, eyes finding shadow. Movement, a figure sliding between stone, rifle raised. She exhaled, slow, squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked, the figure dropped. Another shadow moved, another shot. The air burned with sound, heat, dust. Daniels fired wildly, rounds smacking stone far from target. His panic spread like a smell. She reached out, grabbed his vest, yanked him back down. "Breathe," she shouted over the gunfire. His wide eyes locked on hers. She held him steady, forcing calm into her stare. Slowly, his breathing slowed. He steadied the rifle. Lewis shouted, "Flank left." She moved without hesitation, body sliding across stone, bullets sparking inches away. Dust filled her mouth, grit grinding against her teeth. She pressed into cover, raised her rifle, fired. 1, 2, 3. Silence. The echoes rolled away, fatting into wind. She froze, ears straining. The silence pressed hard, heavy, waiting. Lewis scanned, rifle steady. His chest rose and fell slow, controlled. Daniels trembled, sweat dripping, but his rifle stayed steady now. The prisoner groaned, head dropping forward. They moved closer slowly, rifles still raised. The ropes were frayed, blood crusted around his wrists. His lips moved, voice broken, words faint. She crouched, staring at him, her chest burned. He wasn't her brother, but he could be someone, someone waiting, someone searching. Her throat tightened. Daniels whispered, "What do we do?" She swallowed. Her mind screamed one truth: we can't leave him. But another voice in her chest, colder, sharper, whispered the risk. It's bait. It's always bait. Lewis looked at her, his eyes steady, waiting. He wasn't going to make the call, not this time. He was waiting for her. Her breath caught, her hands trembled. The prisoner raised his head weakly. His eyes met hers. And in that broken, silent look, she saw her brother again. She closed her eyes, the storm inside rising, breaking. When she opened them, her decision was already made. What was one life worth? The question tore through her as she crouched in the shadow of the ridge, staring at the broken man tied to stone. His lips trembled, words spilling in a language she didn't understand, syllables rough with pain. His eyes locked onto hers, desperate, begging, clinging to her with a weight she couldn't shake. She could feel Daniel staring too, his breath sharp, his face pale. Lewis waited in silence, his rifle still scanning the ridge, his expression unreadable. He wasn't going to decide for her. He'd chosen not to. The weight shifted. It was hers now. Her fingers twitched near her rifle stock. She could almost feel her brother's hand, that last night before he disappeared. The way his grip had been warm, trembling, refusing to let go. She told him she would come back for him, that she would find him. And here she was, years later, with another man's eyes burning holes through her chest. Her throat tightened. Daniels whispered, his voice breaking, "We can't leave him." Lewis didn't move. His silence was a wall, impenetrable, unyielding. She exhaled slow, her lungs heavy with dust and doubt. The prisoner's voice cracked again, his body slumping forward against the ropes. The sound cut deep. She moved. Her knife slid from its sheath. The rope gave under the blade with a dry snap. The prisoner collapsed into her arms, limp, his weight heavier than his body should have been. Blood smeared across her gloves. His breath rasped, shallow but alive. Daniel's shoulders dropped with relief. Lewis's jaw tightened. He didn't argue. "Up," she whispered. Daniels grabbed the prisoner's arm, slinging it over his shoulder. The man groaned but staggered upright, legs shaking. Lewis swept the ridge again, then gave a short nod. "Move." They slipped into motion, every step heavy with the risk of echo. The prisoner stumbled often, his weight dragging Daniels down. Dust clung to their boots, rocks shifting underfoot. The silence was sharp, every noise amplified. Her chest clenched tighter with each sound. They were too slow, too exposed. Lewis whispered without looking back, "This slows us. Enemy will regroup." She knew he was right, but her legs kept moving, steady, determined. Her arms supported the prisoner when Daniels faltered. She couldn't stop. Not now. The path narrowed, rocks pressing in on either side, shadows twisting shapes into threats. The prisoner's breath rasped, wet and broken. She could feel his heart through his ribs, rapid, unsteady, fighting for life. Her own heart pounded in answer. Every beat was a memory. Her brother's face lit by firelight, his last words, his silence as he was taken. She blinked hard, forcing the vision away, but it lingered. Always. Daniels broke the quiet with a whisper. You think he knows where the others are." Lewis's head turned slightly, just enough to mark the thought. The prisoner groaned, words spilling again. Too soft, too broken. She wished she could understand. Wished the syllables weren't just sound but meaning. Maybe then she'd know whether she'd saved a life or doomed them all. The path widened into an open slope. Wind swept hard across the ridge, carrying dust that stung the eyes. Their shadows stretched long, moving targets in the sun. Lewis froze, crouched, raised his hand. They dropped low. She scanned quick. Silence, wind, no movement, but the stillness was wrong, too heavy. Lewis whispered, "Ambush." Her throat closed. Her eyes flicked to the prisoner. His lips moved, whispering something urgent, shaking his head weakly. Her stomach turned. Was he warning them or luring them? Daniels whispered, panic creeping in. "What do we do?" Lewis's hand tightened on his rifle. His eyes flicked to her. Again, waiting. The decision pressed down, heavier than stone. She inhaled steady. Her voice was low, controlled. "We move fast, low, don't stop." Lewis gave a short nod. They ran. Dust exploded beneath boots, whined whipping hair and sweat. The prisoner stumbled, nearly collapsing, but she caught him, dragged him forward. Bullets cracked a heartbeat later, tearing the air, snapping against stone. "Contact front," Lewis roared. The slope erupted. Figures burst from shadow, rifles spitting fire. She dove behind rock, dragging the prisoner with her. Daniels fell flat, firing wild. Lewis returned fire, steady, sharp. Her rifle snapped up. Target, breath, squeeze, a shadow dropped. Another moved, shot, sparks from stone. The prisoner cried out, clutching his side. Blood soaked through his torn shirt. Her breath caught. Daniels shouted, "He's hit." Lewis barked, "Cover left." Gunfire shredded the air. Dust stung her eyes. She pressed her cheek to the rifle, steadying, forcing calm through the storm. Another shot. Another enemy down. Daniels fired, his shots tighter now, steadier. Fear still in his face, but his hands held. Lewis advanced, stone to stone, every burst controlled, deliberate. She moved too, dragging the prisoner, heart hammering, lungs burning. His weight slowed her, but she didn't let go. Bullets snapped inches past her head, slamming into rock with sharp cracks. She ducked, grit raining down, ears ringing. Her chest screamed for breath, for relief, but she pressed on. Lewis shouted, "Push now." They surged forward. A last volley of shots cracked the ridge, then silence fell sudden, heavy. Her ears rang, her heart thundered. The slope was clear. Bodies sprawled in the dust, rifles abandoned. Lewis scanned hard, breathing sharp. His rifle stayed ready, clear. Daniels sagged against stone, chest heaving. His eyes darted to the prisoner, to her, to Lewis. Fear still clung to him, but something else now too, a flicker of respect. She collapsed to her knees beside the prisoner. Blood soaked his shirt, dark and spreading. His breath rasped shallow, weaker by the second. Her hands pressed hard against the wound. Warmth spread across her gloves, thick and sticky. His eyes found hers. For a moment everything else fell silent. The wind, the heat, even the ringing in her ears. Just his eyes, wide and broken, clinging to her like he was already halfway gone. Her brother's face stared back at her. Her chest split open. Her breath shuddered, breaking, but her hands pressed harder, refusing to let go. Daniels crouched close, his voice high, frantic. "We need a medic, we need." "We don't have one," Lewis cut in, his voice flat, steady. "And we can't stay here." She looked up at him, fury burning behind her tears. Lewis's stare held hers. "You knew this was risk." Her jaw clenched. Her hands didn't move. She kept pressure on the wound, kept her brother alive through a stranger. The prisoner coughed, blood streaking his lips. He whispered again, words weak, fractured. His hand lifted, trembling, pointing toward the horizon. Daniels leaned close, straining to hear. "What's he saying?" Lewis shook his head, eyes narrowing. She leaned close. The man's breath was warm against her ear, broken syllables forming barely their words. Not English, but one word cut through. "Camp." Her eyes snapped to Lewis. He understood too. Her brother's ghost pressed harder against her chest. The prisoner coughed again, his body shaking, blood spilling warm through her fingers. She held on tighter. Lewis crouched close, his voice low, sharp. "We can't carry him and fight. He'll slow us. We leave him." "No," she snapped, her voice breaking through the silence like glass. Lewis's jaw tightened. Her hands didn't let go. Her eyes burned. "I'm not leaving him." Silence stretched. Daniels swallowed hard, looking between them, eyes wide. Lewis stared at her, the weight of command heavy in his silence. Then finally he exhaled. "Then we move, but if he slows us enough to kill us all," his eyes locked hers, hard, final, "it's on you." She nodded once, sharp, unflinching. Her hands never left the prisoner. The wind howled across the ridge. Dust swirled in the sunlight. Somewhere far beyond, her brother's silence pressed against her chest, waiting. She adjusted her grip, pulled the prisoner tighter against her, and stood. "Then let's move." How far could they carry a man before the weight broke them? The question dug into her bones with every step, every stumble forward across the harsh terrain. The prisoner's body hung heavy against her, his arm draped over her shoulder, his breath ragged against her ear. His weight wasn't just flesh and blood, it was the weight of a vow, of a brother's ghost, of a choice she couldn't take back. Daniels bore part of him too, his young face pale, jaw clenched, sweat streaming down his temple. His boots scuffed hard against stone, each step dragging like he was wading through mud. Lewis moved ahead, silent, scanning, always scanning. His rifle never dipped, his shoulders never slouched. He didn't look back often, but when he did, the flicker in his eyes spoke volumes. Not anger, not judgment, just the steady weight of a man measuring how much longer they could last. The sun burned overhead. No clouds, no mercy. Their shadows stretched long across the ground, easy trails for eyes that might be watching. Every breath stung. Dust filled their throats. The prisoner coughed, blood flecking his lips, each sound scraping her raw inside. She pressed harder against him, forcing him forward. She wouldn't let him fall. Daniel stumbled, nearly dropped him. She caught them both, teeth gritting, legs burning. "You good?" she hissed. Daniels nodded too fast, his eyes wild, his voice shaking. Yeah, I'm good." He was, she could see it. His shoulders trembled with the strain. His breaths came quick, panicked. But he kept going. Maybe because she hadn't stopped. Maybe because he couldn't bear to be the one who did. Lewis raised a fist, halting them. They froze, crouched low, hearts hammering. The wind whispered through the rocks, carrying faint sounds. Voices, distant, sharp, enemy. Her stomach dropped. Daniel's eyes widened, darting to her. They're close. Lewis crouched in the dust, head tilted, listening. His jaw flexed. Then he motioned left toward a jagged cut in the ridge. "Through there," he whispered. They moved slow, hunched, dragging the prisoner between them. His boots scraped the dirt, leaving streaks behind. Too obvious, too easy to follow. Her heart pounded harder. She scanned back, every shadow alive with threat. The voices faded, but the fear didn't. They slipped into the cut, stone walls closing in, shadows swallowing light. The air cooled, heavy with dust. Their footsteps echoed faintly, too loud. The prisoner groaned, his head lolling against her shoulder. She tightened her grip. Daniels whispered, "He's fatting." Her throat clenched. She shook her head, refusing the thought. "He's holding." But inside, doubt clawed. His skin was cold, clammy, his breath shallow, uneven. The blood hadn't stopped. Her gloves were stiff with it. Lewis stopped at a bend, scanning the narrow path. He turned back, eyes sharp. 5 minutes, rest, quiet. They sank down against the stone, backs pressed to cool rock. Her legs trembled, relief and pain flooding at once. The prisoner slumped, head hanging forward. His chest rose and fell, shallow, weak. Daniels pulled a canteen from his pack, unscrewing the cap with shaking hands. He raised it toward the man's lips, his voice soft. "Here, drink." Water spilled down the prisoner's chin, soaking into torn fabric. His lips moved faintly, a whisper of thanks in a language Daniels didn't know. Daniels' eyes softened. "He's human, just human." She watched the moment, something breaking in her chest. Daniels, scared, inexperienced, shaking, still giving what little he had to a stranger. Lewis stayed standing, rifle steady, gaze locked on the ridge beyond. He didn't rest, didn't soften, he never did. Her eyes burned. She forced them away, focusing on the prisoner's face. The resemblance struck her again, the angle of his jaw, the hollow in his cheeks, shadows of her brother etched in every line. Her brother. She remembered his voice, low, urgent, the night before he vanished. "Promise me. Don't let me disappear." She had promised and failed. Now here she was, carrying another man's life as if saving him could rewrite the past. Her chest ached with the weight of it. The prisoner stirred, lips trembling. Words came faint, broken. She leaned closer. "Camp," he rasped. "North 2 days." Her breath caught. Daniels leaned in too, wide-eyed. "He knows where the camp is." Lewis finally looked down, his expression dark. "Or he wants us to believe he does." Her jaw clenched. She whispered he wouldn't lie. Lewis's gaze locked hers, unflinching. He might not have to. If they planted him, his job's already done. Her chest flared with anger. "He's not bait, he's a man." Silence hung heavy. Lewis's stare didn't waver, but he didn't argue further. Daniels looked between them, uncertain, torn. His voice was small, raw. "If he knows, if there's really a camp." Lewis cut him off. "We don't chase ghosts, not with this weight." Her fists tightened. Ghosts, that was all she carried. The prisoner coughed again, body convulsing weakly. She steadied him, pressed him against her shoulder, whispered words she barely believed. "Hold on, just hold on." 5 minutes passed, too fast. Lewis motioned. They rose again. Pain surged through her legs as she lifted the prisoner. Daniels caught the other arm, straining. Step after step, stone after stone. Hours blurred. The sun dragged low, shadows stretching long, air cooling sharp. Exhaustion sank into bones. Every breath burned. Every muscle screamed. The prisoner grew heavier, too heavy. His legs barely moved now. His head hung low. Daniels stumbled again, nearly collapsing. She caught them, teeth gritted. Lewis's voice cut sharp. "He'll kill us at this pace." She snapped back, breath ragged. "Then we die carrying him." Lewis's eyes burned, but he didn't speak again. The ridge narrowed into another pass. Wind howled through it, carrying faint echoes, shouts, closer this time, pursuers. Her stomach twisted. Lewis halted, eyes narrowing. "They're tracking us." Daniel's voice cracked. "What do we do?" Silence pressed. Her arms shook under the prisoner's weight. Her chest heaved. Lewis's eyes locked hers again. We split. You take him, we draw them off. Her heart stopped. No. Lewis's voice was low, steady, final. They'll catch us all otherwise. Daniel's eyes widened. Fear, panic, disbelief. We can't split. But Lewis didn't look at him, only at her. The silence between them held more than words. He was giving her the choice. Again. Her throat burned. Her grip tightened on the prisoner. If she split, if she took him, she could keep her vow alive. She could keep carrying her brother through this stranger. But if she split, she might be damning the others. The prisoner stirred weakly, whispering again, voice shaking. North Camp, please. Her eyes closed. For a heartbeat, the world fell away. No dust, no wind, just memory. Her brother's face, his hand in hers, his voice a ghost in the dark. Don't let me disappear. When she opened her eyes, resolve burned through the exhaustion. She whispered, voice steady, we don't split. Lewis's jaw tightened. She forced her legs forward, dragging the prisoner, refusing to yield. We moved together. The silence stretched. Then Lewis gave a short nod, a soldier's surrender. Daniels exhaled, shaking, relief flooding his face. They moved, all of them. The voices behind grew louder. The chase was on. Every step forward was war against their bodies, their fear, their ghosts. But she carried him still, and in that weight she carried her brother. She wouldn't let either disappear. Not yet. How long could silence protect them? That question carved itself into her mind as dusk bled across the ridge. Shadows grew longer, stretching into jagged lines across the rock. The prisoner's weight dragged heavier with every step. His breaths rattled shallow in her ear, each one weaker than the last. Daniel staggered beside her, his face pale, lips cracked, eyes hollow with exhaustion. He hadn't said a word in hours, but his trembling hand spoke enough. Every step looked like it might be his last. Lewis moved ahead the same as always, silent, unyielding, his rifle a part of him, scanning every ridge, every shadow. If he felt exhaustion, he hid it as if it were weakness, and weakness had no place here. The air cooled as the sun dipped lower. Wind swept dust in thin spirals across the stone. Behind them, faint echoes lingered, voices, distant but steady, closer now. They were being hunted. Her grip tightened around the prisoner. His head lolled against her shoulder, blood drying dark across his shirt, but his lips still moved, whispering fragments. North Camp, pleading. Her chest burned with the sound. She wanted to believe him, needed to believe him. But doubt chewed at the edges. What if Lewis was right? What if this man's only purpose was to slow them, to lead them into fire? No, she shut it down. She couldn't let herself think that way. If she did, the weight in her arms would crumble into nothing, and then her brother's memory would vanish with it. Not again, not this time. Daniels tripped, nearly collapsing. She caught him with her free arm, teeth clenched against the pain shooting through her shoulder. You're done, she whispered. I can keep going. His words cracked like brittle glass. No, her voice was sharp, leaving no space for argument. Lewis turned, eyes scanning both of them. He didn't speak, he didn't have to. The meaning was clear. They couldn't carry three. Her jaw locked. She adjusted the prisoner higher, shifting more of his weight onto herself. Her legs screamed, fire lancing through her thighs, but she forced them forward. One step, another. Daniels looked at her like he couldn't understand how she kept moving. She didn't understand either. She just knew stopping wasn't an option. Minutes bled into hours. Darkness swallowed the ridge, stars pricking faint against the sky. The wind grew colder, sharper, carrying scents of smoke and dust. And then a sound that froze her blood. A flare hissed upward behind them, bursting white against the night. Shouts followed. Lewis's voice cut through the dark. They've got eyes. Gunfire cracked a heartbeat later, bullets sparking off stone. whining past ears. "Down," she hissed, dragging the prisoner behind a boulder, pressing him low against the earth. Daniels collapsed beside her, chest heaving, panic flooding his face. Lewis dropped into cover opposite, rifle spitting controlled bursts. Muzzle flashes lit the dark, brief, violent sparks. The enemy was close, too close. Their voices carried sharp, their shots deliberate. They weren't probing anymore, they were closing in. Her rifle pressed into her shoulder. She aimed through shadow, breath steady, eyes narrowing. A figure moved, she fired. Another shadow darted, she fired again. Each shot cracked the silence, echoing against the ridge. Daniels fumbled his rifle, hands shaking. He fired wild, shots sparking harmlessly against stone. His breath came ragged, panicked. "Daniels," she snapped. His wide eyes locked on hers. Fear consumed him. "Breathe," she ordered. "Focus." Something in her tone steadied him. His hands slowed, grip tightening. His next shot snapped sharper, closer, not perfect, but better. Lewis advanced 2 steps, pressing forward under cover. His movements were precise, mechanical, cold. But even he couldn't hide the truth. They were outnumbered. The prisoner groaned, curling into himself, blood pooling darker beneath him. His eyes fluttered, lips trembling with words too faint to hear. Her chest cracked at the sight. Daniels shouted over the gunfire, "We can't hold this. What do we do?" Lewis's voice was steel. "We move now." She looked at the prisoner, her brother's shadow in his face. Her arms ached, her lungs burned, but she didn't hesitate. She hooked her arm under his shoulder, dragging him up. "Together," she said, her voice sharp, final. Lewis's eyes flicked to hers, unreadable, but he didn't argue. "Go," he barked. They surged forward, gunfire tearing past them, sparking off rock. Dust filled the air, stinging eyes and lungs. Her legs screamed under the weight, every step a battle, but she didn't stop, couldn't. Bullets cracked closer, one slamming into stone inches from her head. She ducked, grit cutting her cheek. Daniel stumbled again, nearly falling, but she grabbed his vest, dragging him forward. His breath rasped, desperate. Lewis fired controlled bursts behind them, his movement steady even under fire. His silence was unshaken, his presence a wall against chaos. They broke through a cluster of boulders, stumbled down a slope, slid hard into shadow. The gunfire behind slowed, voices shouting in frustration. For a moment, only wind filled the silence. She collapsed to her knees, dragging the prisoner down beside her. Her chest heaved, lungs tearing for air. Sweat stung her eyes, blood smeared her gloves. Daniels dropped too, collapsing flat against the ground, gasping like he'd drowned. Lewis crouched low, scanning, rifle steady. His breaths were sharp but controlled. The prisoner moaned, weak, his lips trembling with broken words. She pressed her hand against his wound, feeling the heat fatting from his skin. Her throat tightened, he was slipping. Daniels whispered, voice hoarse, "We can't keep this up, we'll die out here." Lewis's silence held longer this time. His eyes swept the ridge, the horizon, the night. Then they locked on her. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The weight of the choice pressed heavy between them. Her hands shook against the prisoner's chest. Her mind screamed with 2 truths colliding. If they left him, they might live. If they carried him, they might die. Her brother's voice whispered through memory, "Promise me, don't let me disappear." Her eyes burned. She whispered back, so soft no one else could hear, "I won't." Then she looked up, meeting Lewis's stare, unflinching. "We carry him to the end." Daniel's head turned, eyes wide, fear and disbelief mixing in his face. Lewis's jaw tightened, his silence cutting deeper than words. The prisoner stirred faintly, his hand trembling, reaching. His fingers brushed hers, weak, desperate. That touch sealed it. Her vow was no longer just memory. It was alive, breathing, fatting, depending on her. Lewis finally exhaled, a sound halfway between surrender and warning. "Then move. before they close again. They lifted him, together this time, Daniels under one arm, her under the other. Lewis covered, his silence a shield as they pressed into the dark. The night stretched before them, endless, merciless, alive with pursuit. And in that silence, she carried not just a man, not just a ghost, but the weight of dignity itself. A step, another, and another. The vow lived on in motion. What happens when there are no more steps left to take? That question haunted her as dawn's first pale light brushed across the horizon. The world looked washed out, drained of color, as if even the earth shared their exhaustion. Her legs trembled beneath her, raw muscles pulling like frayed rope. Every breath scraped her throat, each inhale more shallow than the last. The prisoner's weight sagged heavy between them. Daniels on one side, her on the other, Lewis in front, always silent, always watching. The wind cut colder with morning. Thin, sharp. It carried whispers from behind, faint shouts, the snap of a rifle shot too far to hit but close enough to echo. The enemy hadn't stopped, they wouldn't. The prisoner stirred weakly, his lips cracked, whispering words lost in the wind. She leaned close, straining to hear. North Camp. The same broken plea. His breath rattled with it. His eyes flickered open, then shut again, lashes trembling. Daniels shook his head, his voice raw. He won't make it. Her chest clenched, rage and grief colliding. He has to. Why? Daniels snapped. His face twisted, his exhaustion breaking into anger. Why does he matter more than us? Why does he get carried while we die on our feet? The words struck deep. She opened her mouth, but no answer came. Not yet. Lewis turned slightly, his eyes narrowing at Daniels. No words, just the weight of judgment in silence. Daniels' jaw clenched. He looked away, but his shaking hands betrayed his fear. They pressed on. The ridge ahead stretched barren, jagged teeth of rock rising higher. A cruel path, but beyond, if the prisoner's whispers held truth, there would be shelter, maybe even rescue. Maybe. Her mind circled her brother's face again, the way his eyes dimmed when they told him no one would come, the way silence swallowed his name. Never again. She whispered it under her breath, almost a prayer. Never again. The climb chewed at them. Loose rock slipped beneath boots, hands scraped raw against stone. Dust burned their throats, filling their mouths with grit. Daniel stumbled twice, nearly falling. She caught him once, Lewis the other time. Each time, Lewis's silence felt heavier, like he was asking with his eyes, how much further, how much longer before you let go? She ignored it, one step, another, and another. The prisoner groaned, a wet, rattling sound. Blood seeped fresh from his side, soaking the bandages they'd tied hours ago. His weight grew heavier, pulling harder with each step. Daniel's face twisted. He's going to die anyway, you know it. Her throat burned. Then he dies moving, not left behind. Her voice cracked with it, trembling between fury and grief. Daniel stared at her, searching for reason, finding only resolve. His face crumpled. He said nothing more. The wind shifted. Lewis froze. His hand lifted, fist clenched, the signal to stop. They obeyed without question. Silence. Then voices, close, too close. A dozen at least, maybe more. The enemy was spreading, sweeping the ridge, hunting. Her chest tightened. The prisoner whimpered faintly, a sound too soft, but in this silence it felt loud as thunder. Lewis's eyes locked on hers. His jaw moved, silent words shaped between lips. Hide now. They dragged the prisoner into a shallow cut of stone, barely enough cover for three. Lewis stayed crouched outside, rifle steady, his body the first line of defense. The voices grew sharper, footsteps scattering across gravel. Shadows moved against the rock. She held her breath. Daniels clutched his rifle tight, knuckles white. The prisoner shook faintly, lips whispering nonsense. A stone clattered nearby, boots crunched closer. One shadow passed so near she saw the outline of his weapon, the fabric of his sleeve. Her heart thundered so loud she thought it would give them away. Lewis stayed still, silent, the calmest presence in the storm. The patrol passed, fatting. For a moment hope flared. Then a shout. Someone had seen the tracks. Gunfire erupted, sudden, shattering the morning. Bullets slammed into rock, shards exploding. Lewis fired back, sharp, controlled bursts. Each shot echoed like defiance, but it wasn't enough. They were pinned. Daniels panicked, firing blind. His shots cracked wild into stone. She grabbed his arm, steadied him, forced his breath to slow. "Breathe," she hissed, "now." His eyes locked on hers. Her calm cut through the chaos. His next shot steadied, not perfect, but enough. Still the enemy pressed closer. Their voices grew louder, fire hotter, bullets biting deeper into cover. The prisoner cried out, curling against the stone, blood flowing faster. Her chest tore at the sound. Daniels shouted, "We can't hold this, we're done." Lewis's silence broke at last. His voice was low, steady, unyielding. "You hold or you die." It cut through them, sharper than the gunfire. Her eyes burned. This was it, the breaking point. She pressed her hand to the prisoner's chest. His heart fluttered, weak beneath, weak but still there. Her brother's face flashed again. His last words, "Promise me." Her throat closed around the memory. She leaned close to the prisoner, whispering fiercely, "Hold on, please, just hold on." Lewis reloaded with precision, calm even as rounds sparked around him. Daniels whimpered, breath quick, but stayed firing, clinging to her steadiness. The world shrank to chaos, gunfire, smoke, shouts. Then the faint whir of rotors. Her head snapped upward. A helicopter. Distant but real. The sound thundered through the air, faint at first, then growing stronger. Hope, wild, dangerous hope. Daniels laughed, a broken, hysterical sound. "We're saved." Lewis's eyes flicked skyward, then back to her. No words, but something in his gaze softened. The enemy shouted louder, firing harder. They knew too. The helicopter angled in, blades chopping louder, dust whipping through the air. A voice cracked through comms, their comms, alive again with static. "Signal us now." Her hands fumbled, dragging a flare from her vest. Her fingers shook as she snapped it, red fire hissing into the sky. The helicopter dipped lower. Gunfire sprayed from its side, pushing the enemy back. Dust and wind howled, blinding, deafening. Lewis surged forward, covering fire precise, cutting down shadows. She grabbed the prisoner, dragging him up with everything left in her. Daniels on the other side, both of them stumbling, legs buckling but moving. Toward the sound, toward salvation. The helicopter hovered, rope lines dropping. Lewis shouted this time, his voice raw, breaking silence. "Go." Daniels scrambled first, hauling himself up the rope, face streaked with tears and dirt. She shoved the prisoner upward, screaming at her body to hold. His weight nearly pulled her down, but hands reached from above, hauling him in. Then it was her turn. She grabbed the rope, legs shaking, arms burning. She climbed. One pull, another, each one agony. Below, Lewis fired, holding the line, his silence replaced now by the roar of defiance. Her boots left the ground. She rose higher into the helicopter's belly. Hands grabbed her, pulling her in. She collapsed inside, gasping, tears streaking her dirt-stained face. The prisoner lay beside her, pale, fatting, but alive. Daniels clutched his rifle, laughing and sobbing at once. She turned, looking down through the open door. Lewis stood below, rifle blazing, enemy fire closing in. Their eyes met. His silence spoke more than words ever could. Then he stepped back, just one step, a single step into the fire, into the chaos, into the storm. The rope swung empty above him as the helicopter lifted. Her scream tore from her throat, lost in the roar of the blades. She reached, but he was gone. His figure swallowed in dust, bullets, and silence. The last she saw was that single step. Not a retreat, not surrender. A vow fulfilled in silence. The helicopter rose higher, carrying them away, carrying the prisoner, carrying her vow alive. Her tears blurred the world below. She pressed her hand to the prisoner's chest, feeling the faint flutter of life. Her brother's voice whispered through memory, "Promise me." She whispered back, voice trembling but unbroken, "I kept it." The horizon stretched ahead, wide and endless, painted in fire and ash and dawn. Silence filled her chest, heavy, aching, holy. And in that silence she understood. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.